All right, guys, this is chapter 7 on the human body. All right, human body is something we have to know, we have to understand, we have to know how it works, how it operates, how we continuously stay in a state of homeostasis. When that state is altered, what happens, um, how the body reacts to it, and how it tries to correct itself. So you should be at the AEMT level. You may not have had AEMT 1 and 2, but if you have, this should be a review for you. But we'll go through it. So pathophysiology applies comprehensive knowledge of the pathophysiology of respirations and perfusion to patient assessment and management. Gross anatomy includes body parts visible to the naked eye. Also, microscopic anatomy involves components of the body that are small, often visible only through a microscope. So physiology examines the body functions of a living organism. So here's your basic cell makeup, what it does, the different parts of it. Extremely varied in shape and sizes and function, becomes specialized to perform a specific function, performs excretion and respiration, and communicate electrochemically. Everything that happens in the body happens on the cellular level, and these cells either grow or they disintegrate. They're constantly reproducing, and then the makeup in each one of these parts and what they do. So there's just a bigger picture of the cell structure, okay? All right, the cell membrane allows the plasma, also called the plasma membrane, it allows pathways that allow movement into and out of the cell. These pathways allow signals from outside the cell to be detected and transmitted inside. It is extremely thin and delicate, and tiny folds on the surface help increase the surface area. So it is also semi-permeable, meaning that it easily allows things in and out. So there's hydrophobic layers and hydrophilic layers there on that picture. Cytoplasm is the fluid-like material that contains contents of the cell. So cytosol is fluid portion of the cytoplasm. Then the organelles accomplish tasks related to cell structure, growth, and maintenance, and metabolism. Cytosol is where ATP is. And organelles accomplish tasks related to the cell structure growth. All right, organelles has different things in them too, the centrioles. So during cell division, centrioles perform the spindle-shaped structure needed for the DNA. Cilia and flagella extend a certain cell surfaces. Cilia moves fluids over the surface of the tissues. Flagella propels the cells to which they are attached. All right, ribosomes contain the RNA. They help form proteins, and then the endoplasmic reticulum is a network of paths through which substances and proteins move. All right, organelles have the continuous Golgi apparatus. They deal with the proteins synthesized in the ribosomes. The lysosomes dispose of cell waste. The macrophilia is composed of the proteins actin and myosin that provide cell movement and contraction via interaction with actin and myosin. The mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cells that have double membranes that play a central role in the production of energy. The peroxisomes contain enzymes that speed up many biochemical reactions. The thick filaments, massive bundles of subunits composed of myosin, and then the vesicles, the sacs that are formed when a part of the cell membrane folds inward. All right, the nucleus is the largest structure inside the cell. It serves as a control center. It contains the genetic instructions needed to synthesize the proteins that determine cell structures and functions. So the structures consist of DNA and various proteins, and inside the nucleus is a fluid called the nucleoplasm that suspends the nucleus and the chromatin. All right, the life cell life cycle of the cell. Most human cells divide between 40 and 60 times before they can die. So here's the different cycles of a cell. All right, the end phase is the period of preparation to divide. The cell division, cytoplasmic divisions, meiosis and mitosis, cytokinesis are two types of cell division. So meiosis reduces the number of chromosomes by 1/2. And then during mitosis, a cell duplicates itself into a daughter cell. Then during the cytoplasmic division, begins during the second phase of mitosis. Okay. The cell membrane constricts down the middle portion of the cell, and then two newly formed nuclei are separated, and half of the organisms are distributed into each new cell. All right, differentiation's process of a specialization of a cell makes a cell unique. And then it can be divided into identical daughter cells and divide so that one daughter cell becomes partially specialized. So in cell division in cancer, a growth occurs. When cell division and growth occurs at a higher rate than the cell death rate, tissues enlarge. Okay, and this is where we get the neuroplasms. So it's the mass of the tissue produced by abnormal cell growth and division. So it could be benign tumor, which means it remains in the epithelium, or it becomes a malignant tumor and it spreads to the surrounding tissue in a process called invasion. Okay. So cancer cells change shape as they grow and grow gradually resemble normal cells less and less. So the presence of tumor cells stimulates the growth of new blood vessels. So as metastasis increases, organ functions change. All right, cellular respiration is done by glycolysis. And then you get into the Krebs cycle and then into the electron transport chain. Okay. Glycolysis occurs in the system of the cytoplasm. If oxygen is present at the right amount, pyruvic acid can enter the more energy efficient pathways in aerobic respiration. So aerobic respiration yields as many as 36 ATP molecules per glucose molecule. All right, and then this figure shows our anaerobic metabolism versus aerobic metabolism. So during the process of anaerobic metabolism, which occurs in cytoplasm, the breakdown of glucose results in lactic acid. During aerobic metabolism, which occurs in the mitochondria, the breakdown of glucose results in carbon dioxide, water, and adenosine triphosphate. The Krebs cycle is a form of anaerobic metabolism. It's also called the citric cycle or the carboxylic acid cycle. When food is ingested, large macromolecules are broken down into simple molecules. Proteins are broken down into amino acids. Carbohydrates are broken down into glucose. Fats are broken down into glycerol or fatty acids. Glycerol and amino acids are broken down into pyruvic acid. Okay. Electron transport chain, 34 molecules of ATP are produced in aerobic process. So ATP is what gives us energy, and it is done during the glycolysis of the Krebs cycle. All right, cellular transport mechanisms refer to how materials enter and exit the cells. Okay. So all cells try to help maintain homeostasis. Electrolytes are chemicals that are dissolved in the blood and are made up of salt and acid substances. So that cell membrane determines whether materials are allowed to pass through. All right, the passive movement of a solute allow moving from an area of high concentration to an area of low concentration and an even distribution of particles is achieved. So in homeostasis, we want the same amount, usually on each side. So we allow it across the plasma membrane. All right, filtration is another method of moving substances. Kidneys filter compounds from the blood. Waste are removed from the blood and excreted through the urine. So that's called filtration. We have facilitative diffusion. A carrier molecule moves substances in and out of the cells. Energy is not required for this. And there's 3 forms of endocytosis and exocytosis. And they are pinocytosis, phagocytosis, and receptor-mediated endocytosis. Okay, so in facilitated diffusion, in picture A, particles move from area high concentrations towards an area of low concentrations with the assistance of a protein. And active transport uses energy from adenosine triphosphate, ATP, to open a pathway for compounds to move against a concentration gradient. And that's down there in picture B. All right, osmosis. It's passive movement of a solute or liquid from an area of low solute concentrations to one of high concentrations through selectively permeable membranes. The membrane is permeable to the solvent, but not the solute. So osmotic pressure is the pressure measure of the tendency of water to move by osmosis across the membrane. So hypertonic solutions. Okay, we'll learn more about hypertonic solutions when we start IV stuff and the solutions that we use there, saline, LR, all those stuff, isotonic solutions, and then hypotonic solutions. Okay, so if it's a hypertonic solution, it's going to move um, fluid out of the cells, making it collapse. Okay, if it's a hypotonic solution, it's going to put too much in there and then cause it to burst, swell up and burst. All right. Body fluid is divided into 2 main compartments: intracellular fluid and extracellular fluid. The reason we need to know this is when we're dealing with CHF first. Your end-stage renal failure patients, all with the fluid that can be in the interstitial space or the intravascular space. Also, your trauma patients, how are we going to maintain fluid balance there and help maintain homeostasis with these patients? All right, organ is composed of at least 2 kinds of tissues, organized to perform a complete task, and there's 12 major organ systems. So the skeletal system, of course, gives us structure. It helps protect the vital internal organs that we have. Ligaments connect bone to bone, tendons, connect muscle to bone, cartilage cushions between the bones. Bones, we've got a lot of those. We talk about those all the time. Just be familiar with their names, where they're at, and their function a lot of times. All right, here's the different parts of the bones. The spongy bone inside contains a lot of vessels. This is where we get into the IO insertion. So be familiar with that. Joints where 2 long bones come together in contact. We see a lot of sports-related injuries here, and then we have the long-term effects of those injuries. So with ligaments, the tendons there. Okay, ball and socket joints of your hips and shoulders, and hinge joints of your extremities. So the skeleton itself, okay, how it's made up. The axial skeleton at the top, the appendicular skeleton all the way down. Different bones of your cranium and face. Be familiar with some of those, especially like your mandibles. Yeah, I know it's kind of hard to differentiate the cranium at times, but just make sure you use the correct anatomical locations. If you're not, you may have an abrasion here on the temporal, or you have a full frontal fracture here. Okay. Here's all of the sutures. Fontenelle will be familiar with it in your pediatric population. When we talk about that later, there's some different signs there, and it's going to tell you what the pediatric may be going through. All right, here's the floor of the cranium, and this is like a sagittal view of it. So if you basically just cut the top of the head off and remove the brain itself. All right, here's all of the names of the facial bones. And then the bones of the orbit itself. All right, the bones of the nose, the mandible and temporomandibular joints, okay? And then the bones that help support the neck, okay? A lot of vessels in here, arteries, cartilages, veins, a lot of large vessels in here. All right, there's your seven cervical spines, your thoracic 12, your lumbar 5, the sacrum 5, and then the coccyx 4. Here's the makeup of your vertebrae. Each one of these could be possibly fractured without column, spinal cord involvement. So remember that. There's your different ribs with your floating ribs down here at the bottom, the sternum, the manubrium. Well, here's what the thorax contains, okay? There's a lot of important stuff in there, obviously. And then the appendicular skeleton with your scapula, your clavicle, your shoulder joint, ball and socket joint of the shoulder, the humerus, articulates, and the glenoid fossa. All right, your appendicular skeleton continue with your upper extremity, your arm, forearm, wrist, hand, fingers, and humerus. And then your hand, okay? And each one of these carpals, metacarpals, and phalanges all have names. All right, the pelvic girdle also contains some very large vessels as far as the femoral artery, and then it comes back up in your veins, back to your heart, into the inferior vena cava itself. Your lower extremities with your hinging joints, connection here. Your femur is a very large bone. We do a lot with it. We are very meticulous of high mechanism if this bone is fractured. Also, there's different ways to treat that. We could experience a lot of fluid loss and blood loss due to these large vessels here. All right, there's the different divisions of the what we know, common language here, and then you get down into your metatarsals, phalanges here. All right, all the different ligaments, tendons here in the knee, and then the ankle. All right, bones protect internal organs, muscles that enables movement. Various bones use calcium to create a structure that is hard and resilient. Bones consist of collagen and mineral hydroxide. So here's the 3 different makeups of muscle tissue. So cardiac tissue, thank the Lord, it operates on its own, has its own nucleus, and that's what the differentiation there is. All right, skeletal muscle, we can help tell it what to do and how to move. And then smooth muscle, a lot of times, it does operate on its own and helps maintain homeostasis. You see a little bit more bigger nucleotide there. So different muscles and their names throughout the body here and what they're used for. All right. Allows a person to move and manipulate in their environment. So muscle fibers have just enough ATP for short-term contraction. Then ATP must be regenerated using existing ATP molecules in the cells. And this is why it's important to understand glycolysis with the glucose breakdown, the Krebs cycle, so that we understand how ATP is made and how it's regenerated so that we know that our muscles are going to work. All right. Oxygen is required for the breakdown of glucose in the mitochondria. If we have an oxygen debt, the amount of oxygen that liver cells required to convert the lactic acid into glucose. Then the sensation of muscle fatigue occurs when the energy supply to the muscle is inadequate. All right, here's your respiratory system, all the body structures that it contains. So understanding the respiratory system is, important to us, especially at the advanced EMT level. We will be learning how to intubate. You need to remember the structure and different parts of the respiratory system. We also introduce you into new medications that can affect the alveoli, new oxygen delivery devices that have effect on the alveoli and the bronchioles. So, remember that the trachea is here, it bifurcates here into the corona, and then it goes into the right and left main stem. Always try to remember that the right main stem over here is a little bit straighter, and we'll go over that later too. These ribs here, how they sit up over the lung itself, how it can impede when those are fractures. So the orthophonics there, the glottis up at top, we'll talk about different devices that we'll use and what we have to see where there's a placed. Also knowing where their vocal cords are at. The trachea itself has to draw bronchial retreat at alveoli in the lungs. Gas exchange occurs in the alveoli at the very small lower airway. So cricothyroid cartilage here, the cricoid cartilage on the bottom, thyroid cartilage on top, then the cricothyroid membrane here. Okay, make sure you understand that, especially if you continue on with your paramedic stuff. All right, many different sounds of the lungs. Okay, it's got a connective tissue that surround it. Please remember there's 3 on the right, 2 on the left lobes. Also remember that these lobes can be removed. I had a couple cases where people had lobectomies, and this is why we'll miss the lung sounds at different spots. All right. So your aorta, your vena cava are stashed up into here. There's a lot of protection there, but however, with high mechanism, that can become a problem also. All right, respiration is diffusion, which process by which gas dissolves in a liquid. Oxygenated blood enters the left side of the heart. It's pumped to the tissues. So because there's some alveoli, a fairly large surface area exists to help respiratory exchange occur. Okay, and here's how that works. The blue parts are non-oxygen deprived fluid. The red parts are oxygen-rich fluid. All right, the chemical control brain automatically controls breathing. Thank the Lord. Remember, main respiratory stimulus is accumulation of carbon dioxide in the blood. So we breathe in oxygen, we breathe out CO2. So bodies initiate that by the level of carbon dioxide in the blood. Okay. And please remember that carbon dioxide, the reason why we breathe it out is because of photosynthesis with the plants, because they breathe in carbon dioxide to produce oxygen for us. Hypoxic drive is a backup system to control respiration. Okay, here's your pH system, 7.35 to 7.45, and extremely acidic in the lower half, and extremely basic up above. Okay, our buffer system, renal control system. This is important with our kidneys and how they control and help keep us at a neutral base, our neutral 7. Tidal volumes, we'll talk about that later when we're doing respiratory. Try not to over exert our tidal volumes in the lungs. circulatory system. Our heart is a pump, but it also has an electrical system with it too. It is completely closed, and it circulates around the body and through the lungs. Okay, what our heart does, the different makeups of the heart and the parts of the heart. If you haven't reviewed this in a while, it is important to review it, important to understand it, important to understand the flow through the heart, the right atrium, through the tricuspid valve into the left ventricle out to the lungs, comes back on the right side of the right atrium through the mitral valve, and the left ventricle should be the biggest part of our heart, and out through the aorta, comes in through the vena cavas. So there are valves in the heart. They help prevent backflow into certain areas of the heart, but when they fail, this is where we get problems and build up a fluid. So the different cardiac cycles and what we're here to love a dub dub. So, thankfully the heart has its own electrical conduction system and it operates on its own. So we don't have to sit here and tell the heart to beat all the time. All right, the SA node, AV node, the bundle his, the right and left bundle branches, and the Purkinje fibers. As we go down this list, the strength of contraction of the electrical system of the heart decreases. So hopefully we have everything happening through the SA node that keeps us at a rate of 60 to 100. If it is not at the SA node, it goes down into the AV node, it starts to slow down. In the AV node, we might have a rate of 40 to 60. Down into the bundle of his and the bundle branch blockages, bundle branch. We can have a slower rate than the Purkinje fibers is where our beta and V-fib occurs. And this is where the heart is just sitting there quivering, or it's, not really doesn't have a pumping action, so we have a backup of fluid within the heart itself. And this is why we use diastolic rhythms to help reset the heart so that the Purkinje fibers are not in control anymore. Hopefully it goes back up into the SA node, and that's what's in control. Okay. There's chronotropic, jopotropic, non-tropic states. So there's baroreceptors that respond to the change in the pressure, usually within the heart or the main arteries. Those chemoreceptors sense the changes in the chemical composition of blood, and that promotes stimulation of the receptors, often causes activation of either parasympathetic or sympathetic nervous system. Alpha effects result in vasoconstriction, and beta results in increased inotropic, domotropic, and chronotropic. And we'll talk about that with our pharmacology, the different drugs that we give and which, do they affect the alpha cells or do they affect the beta cells? So cardiac cycle, we have systole, is the contraction of the ventricular mass and pumping of blood into the systemic circulation. And then we have diastole, is the relaxation phase. And then pulse pressure is the difference between those two. All right, the afterload is the pressure on the aorta against which the left ventricle pumps out the blood. The stroke volume is the amount of blood ejected in one contraction, and cardiac output is the amount of blood pumped in 1 minute. All right, the starters along with the heart is the increased venous return until the heart stretches the ventricles, resulting in increased cardiac contractility. The ejection fraction is the percentage pumped out from the left ventricle in each contraction, and the preload is the pressure under which the ventricles feel. All right, so the body the blood is transported through the body via the arteries and veins, and that's where down there in the capillaries everywhere is where your exchange of CO2 and O2 happen. And see, and here I always point out where you can tell that the arteries have a thicker wall, bigger, and why that pressure going out and away from the heart, and when we have arterial bleeds, this is why the blood is so much redder because of the oxygen carry capability there. And then we come back via the veins, and it doesn't have as much oxygen because we've had that exchange. We've got that waste coming back through the venous system. and we don't have as much pressure because it's kind of just going back to the heart to be pumped out again. All right, the circulation of the heart, kind of talked about that. The left main coronary artery divides into two branches, the LAD, the circumflex coronary arteries. Okay. The coronary arteries of the heart, and it goes down into the left and right coronary. So, yeah, there's all those there. We can have blockages anywhere of this. This is where our myocardial infarctions happen through these coronary arteries. So, pulmonary circulation, I talked about that a little bit. This is the only place where deoxygenated blood is carried into pulmonary arteries, and oxygenated blood comes back to the heart via the pulmonary veins. Right. Oxygenated blood leaves the heart through the aortic valve and passes into the aorta, and then we have all the arteries there. Okay. Vascular system of the heart, the brachiocephalic artery, the common carotid arteries, the vascular system of the extremities, and the different pulses that we can feel. The thoracic artery is the visceral artery supplies blood to the thoracic organs. Parietal arteries supply blood to the thoracic wall. Your abdominal aorta there, it's a very large artery, and all the things that it supplies. And then your pelvic and lower extremities, become familiar with those different places, especially in the femoral and the pedal area. All right, the venous circulation, head and neck, thorax, abdominal, pelvis, your vascular system, your veins, and then blood composition, what it's made up of, and what the red blood cells do, the white blood cells do, and the platelets. Okay. So your red blood cells carry oxygen, white blood cells help fight off infections and inflammatory reactions. And then your platelets are there to help form clots when you do have a bleed. RBCs contain antigens on their surfaces, and they're different types of blood, A, B, AB, and O. All right, there's our different areas that we can check pulses in. So become familiar with those. Systemic vascular resistance, how dilated and constricted the blood vessels are. So the adult average has 5 liters of blood, and children have 2 to 3 liters, and infants may have just 300 milliliters. All right, normal circulation in the adults, I've talked about that. The exchange happens in the capillaries. All right, inadequate circulation in adults, heart automatically lowers blood volume as patients loses blood. The vessels constrict, the heart pumps more rapidly, the pulses increases, and the blood loss is too great, and then everything fails, and the patient goes into shock. Okay. Functions of the blood, what it does. All right, the lymphatic systems, this thin plasma-like fluid formed in the interstitial area. And what it does, lymphatic system allows only carries fluid away from the tissues. It's present in all tissues except the central nervous system, the bone marrow, cartilage, epidermis, and cornea. All right, central nervous system is made up of the brain and the cerebellum, cerebrium, and the brainstem. This is all the different areas of the brain and what each one is primarily responsible for. Then you got your spinal cord and how it transmits stuff from the rest of the body back to the brain. Peripheral nervous system is your sensory system. Your cranial nerves, there's 12 pairs of them, and this is a list, and what they do and where they're at. And then you got your peripheral nervous system as it bounces off of the spinal column, and spinal cord itself, and which part of which vertebrae is affected if you have a loss of sensation below that area. Okay, the eyeball is called a globe. The skin itself is the largest system of the body. So it plays a crucial role in homeostasis as it maintains thermal regulations of the body itself. The different things that's made up within it, and the epidermis, the dermis, and subcutaneous tissue. It protects, regulates, and transmits information. The digestive system, we hope that ours works well all the time. What all it's made up of and what it does. So our digestive system works by the food coming into the mouth, and it enters the oropharynx and into the esophagus, we hope, and not into the trachea. Then it goes to the stomach where it's converted into chyme, and then the pancreas produces insulin and digestive enzymes. The liver filters out what needs to be filtered out, and the gallbladder serves as a reservoir for concentrated oil bile production in the liver. Excuse me. Right, the small intestines, and then it goes down to the large intestines. And then down to the rectum where it goes out. There's all kinds of different secretions are added by the food. It converts food into basic sugar, fatty acids, and amino acids. All right, our endocrine system is the complex message control system. Our exocrine glands excrete chemicals for elimination, and our endocrine glands secrete and release chemicals that are used inside the body. So it releases hormones to regulate many body functions. If it releases an agonist, the molecules that bind to a cell's receptor and triggers a response by that cell, and an antagonist, a molecule that binds to a cell receptor and blocks the action of the agonist. All right, there's all the different hormones and where they could be released at. The thyroid gland, the large gland at the base of the neck, secretes calcitonin. The parathyroid gland is embedded in the posterior portion of each lobe of the thyroid. It can produce and secrete parathyroid hormone. All right, pancreas and our insulin. The adrenal glands of the kidney, at the top of the kidney, adrenal cortex and adrenal medulla, and those help produce epinephrine, norepinephrine, and then our reproductive hormones and glands. The urinary system controls discharge of certain waste materials and filters from the blood to by the kidneys. So it helps control our pH and filter and eliminates waste. The kidneys rid blood of toxic waste. They control balance of water. We talked about that earlier. The urine passes through the renal pelvis via the urinary bladder, and then the bladder empties through the urethra. All right, the genitalia system controls the reproductive process. The male genitalia lies outside the pelvic cavity, and the female genitalia are controlled within the pelvis itself. And there's a picture of each and the different parts and organs of each. And there's the female. All right, this is what happens during the menstrual cycle and fertilization. All right, during the life support chain, body cells, tissues, organs require oxygen, nutrients, and removal of waste to perform their job. So oxygen is brought to the cells through the respiratory and circulatory systems. Digestive system takes food and breaks it down to glucose. and the circulatory system is carrier of these supplies and waste through the process of perfusion. Okay, that's the end of this chapter. So, like I said, it's important for us to understand AEMT because as you advance more, we have certain drugs, and we do certain things that affect each one, both the anatomy and the physiology. So